Hello and welcome to another video by fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name's David.
Mine's Az.
My name is Mark.
My name's Neale.
Hello and welcome to what is the final video that we'll be doing for the 2018-19 season. It's finally finished. We can finally stop. We can finally stop making all these big decisions every week, stressing ourselves out about price changes, transfers, everything. That's it. The season has finished and all we can do now is reflect. So what we're going to do in this particular episode, we're going to react to what we've just had happen in Gameweek 38 and collect our thoughts from there. But we've got plenty of other things to discuss from the rest of the season and looking ahead. So Az, why don't you tell us in a bit more detail what we're going to look at tonight?
Yeah, so we can't really look ahead to the next game week because there isn't one. So it's going to be a bit of a reflection of what's been happening, but also a little bit of looking forward to next year, like you said. So we'll start by just talking through what's happened this week. Had mixed fortunes, I think, from our kind of our pre-talk on here. Be good to know what everyone's highlights of the season are and what the low points were. I think for Mark and I, there's probably quite a few of those. Lessons learned for 2019-20. What we're going to do differently next year? What can we learn from this season? It's been a tricky one for a lot of top managers. So it'd be good to learn some lessons there. And the big question is, what we're going to be doing all summer? I've got no idea. What do I do about fantasy football?
You're going to have to work it out in the next 55 minutes. What you're going to do this summer.
Any ideas welcome.
One thing I should just say before we get completely started on that, we're going to have a look at how we all got on in Game Week 38, or at least what we're all at pre-bonus probably, because a lot of it hasn't loaded yet. We are this week going to be starting our Team of the Year content. So in the live chat, if you guys could start submitting some nominations of players from all positions, if you want, of who you think should be included in that, and then we'll get the polls set up over the next 2 weeks. Basically, we'll start on goalkeepers probably on Tuesday, but obviously we need some nominees, and goalkeepers especially I think is a tricky one. There's not really any goalkeeper I've been particularly fond of this year, so I'll be intrigued to see who you guys think should be included on that shortlist. So make sure you start submitting those in the live chat. Let's get started on looking at Game Week 38. Then obviously it's hot off the press, only finished within the last hour and a half or so. Plenty of goals. And kind of mixed emotions for a lot of us, but Az, I think we'll start with you because you've had an incredible Game Week 38 and an incredible comeback. You're beaming. You're definitely the happiest of all of us after Game Week 38. Talk us through what happened on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I was worried going into it. I looked at my team and I thought, I've got some issues here. Had doubts around Robertson and Shaw. I was a bit worried about Delafeu because of the Watford FA Cup final, and a bit worried about rotation. And in the end, Shaw missed out, but it wasn't that big a deal. And yeah, the rest of my team just delivered, which this season for me is just so rare. Like, I feel like I've been kind of clinging on to like one player who scores really highly, like when I have a good week. And it's nice to finish the week with kind of high scores from all of my team. So on 74 points at the moment, pre-bonus. I'm 90k going into this. I should finish around the 60k mark, which in Game Week 29 I was ranked 334,000, and it all looked hopeless. I then had a really good week, which I'll talk about probably a bit later when we talk about what kind of went well. And yeah, it's just been really good from there. So, I said weeks ago my aims were top 100k finish and to survive in Mark's Elite 64 League, and it looks like I've done that. So I can have no complaints. I'm just going to take this season on the chin and roll on to next season and hopefully do a bit better.
I like how you've your main aim there was to just avoid relegation. That's very, very Brighton of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We're kindred spirits, Brighton and I. So yeah, we've got the same goals, same lofty goals each year.
Let's move on to the general. I think you were next up in terms of how well you did this week. But one thing I say I love and I hate because I want you to do well, but Wilson captain last day of the season, the narrative on that is just off the scale. So talk us through it.
Yeah, do you know what? I just had to do it on the final day. The pain he caused me all season, I just said, why not? I've got nothing to lose. I'll give him a chance at redemption. I'll bring him in. I'll give him the armband. And, if he scores a hat-trick, all will be forgiven. And, I'll look to him next season. But he's just made things worse for himself now. He's probably added himself to my no-buy list in FPL. So, yeah, I had 2 free transfers. And I brought in Wilson for Jimenez. And I got rid of Kolasinac as well for Balbuena. It was frustrating because I was looking at it yesterday and I was looking at Fabian Schär, 4.5. But waiting for possible early team news. Price changes forced my hand in. I only had 4.3 to spend, so missed out on a nice haul from Fabian Scher today as well, just to rub salt in the wound. But yeah, pretty average game week. I think I'll finish on about 55 points. Mane, Eriksen, Ings, and Aguero, the point scorers. Apart from that, not much else. I think it might be just about enough to stay inside top 500k. So, very frustrating season, but more than anything, 10 to 5, 5 to 5 today when those final whistles went, it was just a relief for me, and I can just put this season behind me now and look forward to next season.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that relief going around, definitely. Neale, let's come to you next to see how you got on with your team for Game Week 38.
Yeah, pretty below par, I think, in terms of the averages around the top 10k, which is what I was trying to push into this week. Hasn't happened. I think I'm going to finish around just inside the top 15k based on Ragabody's predictions, which is fair enough, really. I mean, I think I've been inside the top 10,000 once this season, so I can't really feel unduly punished by that. It's I've never really threatened on a consistent basis, so yeah, not too bad, really. It's a sort of case of what might have been, and we'll talk about our season lowlights later on. But I do wonder what would have happened if I hadn't sold Salah prior to the Bournemouth game. He scored a hat-trick. But, if I hadn't sold him, I wouldn't have the team structure I have. So it's a sort of domino effect. Yeah. But yeah, I think top 15k, not bad, considering some of the horror stories this season. Some really, much like Mark and Az, some really top managers who struggled. You've got to kind of be grateful for that kind of finish. But yeah, Game Week 38, nothing much to write home about. I think I've got Laporte, Mane, Aguero. I think one of the only three who scored anything. Oh yeah, Robertson as well, got a clean sheet. But yeah, pretty slim pickings, really. I think the thing that consoles me is that no matter what I would have done, like the other options I had for Game Week 38, which were including captaining Aguero or drafting in Sterling, wouldn't have made any difference. It wouldn't have elevated me into the top 10k. So yeah, I'm sort of
quite reassuring, isn't it? When you look at the things you're planning, and none of them would have really helped. It's like, okay,
I'd rather finish 14,000 than 10,001.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I just missed out. I'd been kicking myself and reliving.
I think I finished about 10.9k once, and that sucks.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show like how you end your season can dictate how you feel about the campaign as a whole. Because remember last season I dropped out with the top 1k in about Game Week 36, and I was devastated. Game Week 38, I think I finished about 2,000. And that was one of my best ever finishes. So, you've got to get a bit of perspective sometimes. I mean, sort of, if I'd had been asked top 15,000 this season, I probably would have taken it, even though 10,000 is the holy grail. But yeah, I'm content, I think, rather than delighted with how it ended.
I mean, I absolutely feel on that one, because I mean it's similar for me. I mean, how you finish the season does dictate how you feel about it, because I mean, by a long way, this has been my best season ever. Never finished inside the top 100k until this season. I finished, I think, 17k by the looks of it on the live ranking sites. They've all struggled today, so we don't know if 100% certain until maybe in a few hours. But because I was in the top 10k for so long, I think from sort of like Game Week 10 to about Game Week 24, something like that, it completely changes your perspective of what you want to achieve in that season. So then when I eventually dropped out and kind of floated between 10k and 20k for most of the end of the campaign, and then I just about clawed it back. I had that Vardy captaincy a few weeks ago and a few things that just went my way against the grain, pull myself back in. I think I was at 9k before the Man City game on Monday night in Game Week 37. So then to finish at 17k is a bit, I mean, I have to be content with it, because I massively achieved my aim this season, which to be honest was actually just finishing the top 100k. So to finish 17k, I should be very happy with. But as you say, it's a bit like what happened with you last season, Neale. When you're in a strong position and then it just tails off, you can't help but wonder what might have been. And of course, this particular day as well, I decided to put my captain in the only game with no goals. I mean, it's just so frustrating. I mean, that's just so Game Week 38. I mean, you look at what Chelsea had done on Thursday night, and we all sort of thought that Vardy was going to be a great option for the captaincy, and he was in fantastic form himself. And Chelsea, actually, to be honest, watching the game, they were they were the better team for the first half. They came out of the traps a lot faster than Leicester did. Clearly had a lot more of a point to prove. I'm not sure what it was because everything was settled for them. But that wasn't to be. I mean, I was quite happy with the transfers that I did. Salah didn't come in, but I got 9 or 10 points for Redmond. It was quite nice for that to come in. Outside of that, it was just. I mean, Mane's obviously great, but I mean, again, it's mostly the players that everybody has that did well. I mean, even Redmond doing well. He was quite a common replacement for Son. So solid if not spectacular. But I just have to keep telling myself, I've beaten my personal best, and I'm going to have to take that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on you this year as well to come with a good finish. So yeah, I think you've done pretty well.
Yeah, cheers. I mean, absolutely. There's been a lot of pressure at the start. Completely understand, why people kind of looked at my record before I took on this job and thought, what the heck's going on here? But to be honest, I mean, I'm probably going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about lessons learned. But I'll just mention it briefly now. I mean, if it wasn't for being in this job, I wouldn't have finished this high. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I still feel like I'm a bit of a walking advert for the members area. I actually think that maybe Mark just gave me the job as an advert, an experiment. Let's just take a guy who's never really used it as much as everyone else has before, pay him to spend 8 hours a day in the members area and see what happens. And I think it's a success story. So if there's anyone watching this now who hasn't used the members area, go and get membership for next year because it made a huge difference for me, and I'm sure it can make a huge difference.
Isn't it that top 10 things I hate about you, where they take the girl who's a bit of a wreck and then they try and make her into prom queen?
That's me.
Is that you, David?
Yeah, go on then. Cool. Yeah. Let's make that movie. We'll talk about that when we talk about what we're going to do over the summer. We'll make that movie in the fantasy football reboot. Let's go for it. Let's move on now to reflecting on the season as a whole, picking out a few key moments within that. We're going to talk about highlights to start off with. Let's start with you, as obviously most of those highlights I reckon will probably come in the last few game weeks. But talk us through any moments that were particularly nice for you.
Yeah, I mean there isn't many, to be honest. It's been pretty rough. I mean, I got stuck around the kind of 150 200k mark around game week 5, and just kept going back and forth until game week 22. So there's nothing there which really was particularly good or particularly bad. And then it just went to complete pot, and I fell down to about 400k. And then the best moment of my season was in game week 30, when I was walking my dog, and I was just thinking to myself, this season is just rubbish. And I thought I need to do something. Something needs to go. So I looked at the stats, and Son's stats were awful, and Mane's stats at home were incredible. And Mane had Burnley at home, and Son was away at Southampton, so it wasn't a particularly bad game for Son. But I just thought I'm going to do something, so I took Son out for Mane and captained him, and Mane got 28 points with the captaincy. Son was on the bench and didn't play, and Salah only got 5. So that move, combined with the fact I had Sterling, who I'd been plugging on every Scoutcast for weeks and weeks and weeks, who scored a hat-trick against Watford in the same week, I got that week just completely changed my season, because I went from 400k to 185k, so pretty much over half my rank. It's a decision I made based on stats and kind of logic, which I thought I was kind of doing in other weeks, but hadn't really been paying off. So it was kind of, I don't know, a bit of furbing that a bit of research actually kind of pays off on that. Yeah, and then from there I didn't really kind of look back, and it's been a decent end to my season. But I made that move 5 minutes before the deadline. I just remember it. I just remember thinking that I can't keep not doing things because I'm scared of what could happen. My rank isn't that good anyway, so I just did it. And then I just thought, it's just captain as well. He's got a good home record, and yeah, it really paid off. So that's definitely my highlight.
The best thing about that, for me, looking on, is the pressure of that 5 minutes before deadline for then it to come good is really.
And they never work out. I mean, how often does a last minute transfer ever actually pay off? Like normally you do it and then you think, why the hell did I do that? So yeah, that was one of the few times when it was a last minute transfer based on some actual research rather than just thinking, oh my god, I should do this because of absolutely nothing. So yeah, that was a good week, that one.
I'll come to you next, Mark. Apologies that we're asking you about your highlights. I hope you have some.
Yeah, you know what? I'm after spending the last 20 minutes looking through my season history, trying to find a highlight, and I can't find any. So you might want to just skip me for this one. The one fond memory I do have from back in probably September time when life was a lot better for me was after 4 game weeks I was 1.1 million ranked, and I played my wild card for game week 5. And as I often do is on a Saturday do the match of the day challenge. Me and the wife were away for the weekend and we were staying in a hotel, so just avoided all the results. Didn't even watch match of the day on the Saturday night. I brought in Hazard on the wild card. Watched match today on the Sunday morning then without knowing what had happened. And he scored a hat-trick. Can't remember who it was against, but he scored me 20 points that week.
Cardiff, it was Cardiff, yeah.
And I think my rank went from 1.1 million to about 350k in just 1 game week. So that obviously had given me a lot of hope at that time. Obviously, since then, things didn't work out. But if I had to pinpoint one thing that I remember fondly was I have to go all the way back to September for it.
Wow, that sucks.
But I mean, to be fair, I mean, in terms of like successful wildcards, I mean, like objectively, if you just look at that in isolation, I mean, you couldn't have asked for much better within the situation that you were handed.
Yeah, it was great at the time. You know, going from 1.1 million to 350k was a massive shot in the arm. So obviously played the wild card well, but it was the poor decisions which followed. Then I just undid all my good work of that wild card.
Well, I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about those tough decisions that you had to make when we talk about our lowlights. But let's come to you, Neale. Anything that stands out for you other than finishing above me?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that doesn't give me some sort of satisfaction. But no, as I said to you before we started this shift today, we were both working on the 3 o'clocks, that I would have taken you finishing above me for us both to have a top 10k finish, and I do mean that.
That's very kind.
But funnily enough, what Mark says there about game week 5, I think that was my best game week rank of the season. Similarly, I brought in Hazard. I think it was the previous week. I think I'd offloaded Mane, which actually turned out to be a decent move because I think Mane went on a bit of a barren patch after that. And I started the season with Ryan Fraser, who probably was one of my buys of the season. I sort of had him from game week 1 right away through till fairly late on. I think it might have been my second wild card. But both Hazard and Fraser hold big that week in game week 5. So Fraser got 18, Hazard got 20. Then I had Maddison, Zaha, Aguero, Wan-Bissaka, Van Aanholt, Patricio all scored points that week. So I think that got me to within about, I think I was 92 points that week, which was, I probably was a highlight of my season actually. And that was, for long-term viewers, that was the week I moved Kamara over to Quainer for as part of a -8.
Hollywood move that was.
Yeah. So that I can look back on that with fond memories now. The other one would have been the first double game of the season, which was 25, which was when Aguero scored a hat-trick, and I had him as captain, and then I had Laporte as well. And I kept hold of Hazard through that barren run, and he scored that. Was it a hat-trick? No, 2 goals against Huddersfield for that 15 points. So that was a good game week. But yeah, there's been plenty of lowlights, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a minute. But
I think I know which one yours is going to be.
yeah, those 2 game weeks stand out. 5 and 25, I think.
For me, I was thinking about a few that went well for me, but. And I hope people don't think I'm being too negative for mine. But one that I particularly enjoyed for myself was, I don't know if you guys remember when Spurs were playing Cardiff, I think it was game week 8, and there was this massive rush to sign Harry Kane. And everyone was doing it. I think Mark did it, Joe definitely did it, and a lot of people who...
I wildcarded for him.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, so plenty of us all went for it. And at no point did I think that it was a good idea. And... The reason why I was so happy with myself for not going for him in the end was because I kind of based it, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record on this episode, but I kind of based it on what I could see in the data, in that Kane didn't really look at his best. Cardiff, to be honest, didn't even really look like a side that were going to get mauled, because they've been playing a lot of men behind the ball at that point, been playing a lot more cautiously than they did in the second half of the season. And the fixtures after Kane had that particular game, they weren't that great, and basically I just didn't want Kane. I mean, if I was free hitting that week, by all means I'd probably want to have him, but long term I just wasn't that bothered. And I imagine at the time it was probably Aguero was probably the premium forward I had. But yeah, in the end I think I was the only Scoutcaster to hold off, And that had me a bit worried because at that stage, again, it was sort of the pressure was on. I'm the new kid on the block. People think I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm the only Scoutcaster who doesn't go for him, so I expected he was going to score 4 or 5. He then blanks, and because I didn't have him, I captained Hazard, who the next day scored something like 16, 17 points against Southampton. He was my captain, and I think I got 83 points that particular week when the average was really, really low because everyone basically just brought Kane in and captained him. And then that was what I think I was 98k before that. That then shot me up to 30k like in one game week. It was huge, and it was because I went against the grain on a big decision, backed up by what I'd seen in the members area, and it just it was one of those moments where I realised maybe I do actually know what I'm doing, and it was just quite a fulfilling moment. That, and obviously going on from that, I ended up having something like 17, 18 captains come in a row. So there was a few nice moments that just kind of helped, establish me in a position where the pressure was taken off, and really that was the nicest thing, was not having to worry about people critiquing you anymore if you're getting it right. So
your captaincy picks must be a highlight of your season because you went on. I don't know what was the run you went on. Was it?
I think
was it 17 or
17? Yeah. I got really lucky towards the end though. I mean, there was a couple. There was one where I had Hazard like get an assist off his bum, and then there was the one before it. It was Sané who busted the run, but the one who nearly did it in the end actually was Kane. He nearly did it, but it was an Eriksen goal late on against, was it Burnley? And again, it was literally just bounced off Kane's knee, and then Eriksen lashed it in. So I was getting quite lucky. But yeah, no, it was quite. But again, it was just quite nice to have something that kind of people kind of associated with me, as I said, because the pressure was on, and thankfully things kind of going my way helped ease that a bit. So yeah, I definitely. So that came week especially because the thing is, Joe said it quite a lot, was that a lot of people who went for Kane, they were almost a couple of transfers behind because I think they'd had to use 2 transfers to get to him, but I banked one. So then that just put me ahead of the pack for quite a while. So I mean we'll come on to lessons learned in a minute, but one that I'll probably touch on is the importance of patience, even in the wake of just an absolute tsunami of transfers in for a player, even if you think they're not that great. Let's look now at sort of lowlights, and this will maybe we maybe all have quite a few, and this might sort of tie into to lessons. Well, yeah, well, we haven't got too long. So try and keep it as brief as you can. It might tie into the lessons you've learnt, because I mean, for me, that's the case. But anything that's particularly maybe emotionally distressful, and then anything that's tactically, relevant, we can come back to. Let's start. Let's go the same order. Let's go with Az.
Oh, this is depressing. I mean, I sold quite a few players before they hauled. And that was always really annoying. I sold Brooks before he hauled against Brighton, and I had him for weeks. And I was going on about him for weeks, and then he was just in and out of the team, so I just had to get rid of him. And the same to Gundogan as well. I had him for weeks, and everyone was like, "Oh, what a terrible pick he was." And I think it's one of those ones where I think I did kind of give in to the kind of the consensus of Twitter and all the different sites you're on, because people are constantly telling you it's a bad pick, and you kind of in the end think, oh, it probably was a bad pick. And really, they were both kind of just fifth midfielders anyway, who had potential to do quite well, and I sold them both at the wrong time. So I don't think that's a complete coincidence. I had a really rough start to the season. Just before the game kicked off, I got rid of Richarlison, who got 2 goals, Van Aanholt, who got a goal and a clean sheet, and Bernardo Silva, who scored. And the 3 players I bought in just before Gameweek 1 all blanked. So I was immediately like 35 points down or something on what I should have been. So that I kind of felt like I'd never really kind of recovered from that, because I was always kind of, I still think about that now, that's 38 game weeks later. So that kind of sucks. My number one regret though was I had 3 or 4 defenders who all had, no, I had 4 defenders who all had really good games, and I was trying to work out which ones to play. So I went to the members area, did loads of research, picked my 3 players based on stats, and then 10 minutes before the deadline, was just too worried about Doherty against Fulham. I just thought, if he hauls, that's just going to hurt me so much. So I benched Dean for Doherty. Doherty conceded in about 40 minutes, and then Dean scored 2 goals against Burnley from free kicks. And yeah, that sucked, because that one, if we talk about tactics, that was just completely going away from how I play the game. That's one of the few decisions I made based on kind of fear of ownership and worries about certain things. Like the stats told me Doherty was the one to bench, and he was, and I didn't do it because I just panicked. So that's the one that really stays with me. But I mean, there's so many 50-50 calls this season. I've just got wrong. I've got a list of things on my arm, so I won't bore you with them. They're all kind of ones that stand out.
Let's come to you now, Mark. And as you said, try and keep it as brief as you can.
Oh, can't hear you. Yeah, I know. He's gone.
We'll go to Neale and maybe come back to you if
So this is Mark's chance to finally vent and get his spanker out.
Can't hear him, yeah, we'll come to you, Neale, and then hopefully Mark's able to sort out a fix for his mic.
Yeah. So we will. There is probably a lot of overlap with the lessons learned. I'll save some of those wider regrets for that. But yeah, we will revisit that fateful day back in, was it December? When
Good info. I'm great.
I kept my wild card in hand. I was really chuffed to myself, feeling really smug because I got to about 15,000 in the world. And I thought, right, this is my chance to really kick on now. I'll play my wild card for just before the festive period. There was a fixture swing around but then as well, if you can remember. There was good matches for Spurs and Arsenal. So I think I got in, definitely got in a Aubameyang. I think I got in Kane as well. I'll have to double check that. But to fund that, I sold Salah, who hadn't been pulling up many trades, I think, in the preceding weeks. He'd been sort of returning a lot of single-digit hauls. So I decided to ship him, which was immediately before Liverpool played Bournemouth, and he scored a hat-trick. And to make it worse, I'm not really an active Twitter person. That's something I really need to work on more because it's my job. But I made a point of announcing my wildcard plans before kick-off. I said, sort of farewell Salah. This was the first week I hadn't owned him since he joined Liverpool. I had him through the whole of last season from Gameweek 1. And I sold him before his biggest score of the season, which was 21, I think. So the first goal was a knife in the heart. The second was twisting the blade. The third one I just laughed. I just thought it was funny. I just thought you can't really do much about it. And I think that was probably my most liked tweet of the season by a country mile. Everyone kicking the boot in.
Did you not
Schadenfreude, but yeah.
Resignation as well?
Sorry?
Did you not also announce your resignation?
I did,
as well?
I announced my resignation.
Don't worry, I rejected that on the spot, as did you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that makes me feel better about finishing where I did because, to recover from that was...
I captained Salah for that hat-trick and you beat me, so it shows you what you can come back from.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a risk, isn't there, at this point in the season where you can look back on all the negative things, but I did a lot right as well. But that'll obviously stick in my mind that I can laugh about it now, but at the time it was pretty crushing, really. I mean, I thought I'd blow my chance of... I think at that point I was probably pushing for, if possible, top 1,000. But that ended that dream in one fell swoop. Really, I think I dropped. I didn't drop that many points, drop that many places that week, but I think within about 6 or 7 game weeks I was down to about 50k in the world. So because he just kept on hauling over Christmas, and I didn't get him back in till I can't remember when I got him back in. It might have been in for the start of his second Baron run. So yeah, he cost me probably my chances of finishing top 10,000 higher, but it was my own fault. It was a stupid move to make in hindsight, given Bournemouth's record defensively and his own record against Bournemouth. Yeah, that was the low point, I think.
He was poor. He was poor for ages. I sold him, I think, the week before, and he didn't do anything. And I was actually quite happy.
It was method by my madness, I think. And the fact that Liverpool had that tricky run over Christmas. They had 4 fixtures, the best of which was Newcastle on Boxing Day, which I thought you might get arrested for. But and then they had I think three the big 6 around that. Or was it Wolves was one of them, I think, wasn't it? And he just kept on delivering, often from the penalty spot, which was even more galling because he wasn't really delivering on the underlying stats front then. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that was my nadir, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Salah ruined a lot of people last year as well. I mean, for people who didn't realise when to captain him, he's definitely a season-defining player for a lot of people. Let's see if we can come back to Mark now. Hopefully, his microphone situation is resolved and we can hear about some of his tough points this year.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Hey, there we go.
I think it's just a sign that nobody wants to hear about my low lights this season. My microphone didn't switch itself off. Yeah, again, I won't bore people too much. I would be here for about 2 hours if I went through all my low lights. The two I've picked out, the first one's been spoken about already. It's selling Salah just before Christmas. I held on to Salah for the Bournemouth game and I captained him. Got loads of points. I think he had United then after that, and he didn't look great. And then I sold him, and then he went on the run of 12, 12, 12. 2-11. I'll never forget that run. It's just stuck in my head now because I missed out on about 50 points there and a lot more obviously if I would have captained him. So I sold him that week to get Sané and Sterling because they'd been hurting me a lot.
Yeah,
I just had the Man City fear. Brought in Sané and Sterling and then we lost to City and Palace.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did as well.
Leicester and Palace 1 week after the other. So that was crushing over Christmas. The other low light has to be Game Week 37. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I've been joking this season that I've been unlocking all the FPL achievement badges that I don't have. And the last one I needed was score less than 20 points in a game week. So Game Week 37, I managed 19 points from 11 players, which I don't know how is even possible. But I managed it. 6.3 million FPL managers. My rank was 6.2 million in Game Week 37. So that was an achievement in itself.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, you have ticked them all off. I mean, if you can get them all in this season so that you have none of them next season, that's the way to go.
Yeah, do you know what? I just convinced myself that everything that's happened this season, it just means I'm going to win FPL outright next season. So it's nothing to worry about. I'm just going to bounce back and win the whole thing next year.
I mean, you pretty much the FPL gods kind of almost owe it to you at this point. They really do. Yeah, for me,
just looking at your team, Mark, for that week, like it's such a strong team. How did that team get 19? Dan, really? Robertson, Kolasinac, Sterling, Son, Ericsson, Mane, Ward-Prowse, Jimenez, Aguero.
19 points from those guys.
Outrageous.
It would only happen to me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the so many unlucky things for you this season. That's just one of them. I feel really bad now because my low light, it sounds kind of. I think you guys probably would, especially Mark, would have killed for this to be your low light. I mean, I kind of just have to just go with the game week where my captaincy run came to an end because it was so frustrating. As much as I'd had some good luck in, I think like the 15th, 16th, 17th, it was the 18th one where, to be honest, Sané really it was Leroy Sané that did it. And it was another captaincy that I'd picked with the usual criteria for the other ones. He was in good underlying form, having plenty of shots. Palace away from home weren't, looking too strong. And in the game, Sané, I think, hit the post, hit the bar, hit the side netting, had loads of efforts, but it just didn't come in. It was that game that they lost, and I think it was just a result that no one saw coming. And it really just put Man City off their kind of... off their game, and obviously kind of just translated into Sané as well. And the reason why it was so frustrating was because I think 2 days before, me and Mark Southerns and the FPL family, we'd been in London filming this video for like official FPL on kind of, to be honest, kind of a bit like what we're doing now. Looking back, it was a Christmas thing. Things you've enjoyed from the season, things that have been good so far, things you'd like to do in the new year. And it was between game week 17 and 18, and I said, well, I've had 17 captaincies come in a row. I'd like to get to 18. Keep that going for the whole season. And then the video didn't go out until after the run come to an end, so they couldn't use it. It was just so frustrating. I just shouldn't have mentioned it, because that's what jinxed it. So yeah,
definitely.
That's the ghost of Christmas FPL just didn't like me, getting too big for my boots. So there we are. Let's move now on to lessons that we've learned, and as I said, we can get a bit more sort of tactical this time in terms of what we might do differently next year, what we might do the same. I kind of want to include maybe sort of price hikes in here a little bit as well, because I think it's something we should talk about. Wolves players, for example, I mean, we've seen what they can do this year, but in terms of what we kind of can expect from them next year when they're probably going to be a bit more expensive, how do we handle that? So there's plenty of things we can talk about here. So we'll go the same order again. We'll come to you as a couple of things you've learnt this year, and maybe a few players who you liked having this year but probably won't have next year because they might be too expensive, and then the other way around. Are there any players who you think next season might be cheaper than they're worth and you're eyeing up as a potential budget option for next season?
Yep. So lessons learned. I mean, I think it's easy to say, and I think I say it every year. But I had my best season last year when I finished sort of around the 800th mark, and I really feel like that year I really listened to myself, and I really backed myself in kind of what I was doing, and it seemed to pay off quite well. This year I was doing that, and then I feel like I had quite a good end to the season because I kind of continued to do that, and I didn't just kind of, because I could have gone through half the season and thought, right, this isn't working. Whatever I'm doing isn't working. It completely changed the way I play. So bought in a load of players who were highly owned or tried to be too clever or something like that. But I kind of stayed looking at the stats. I stayed with a bit of gut feel and watching matches and things. And in the end, it's kind of paid off. So I do think a lot of my 50-50 decisions, which I was getting right last year and haven't got right this year, is down to luck. So I'm trying not to beat myself up too much about this season. I've ended up with a respectable rank. So my lesson is just to carry on doing kind of what I know and carry on playing the game in the same way, trying to find interesting differentials and try and play the game a bit more kind of not let fear kind of run my thing. So that's one of my lessons. My other lesson, and I every season I say this as well, I need to start noticing sooner when there's going to be a budget player who is going to go on and become the next Mahrez, Ramsey, Jimenez, Fraser. Like every season, you always get these absolute gems who can pretty much keep in your team. They cost 5.5, 6 million, and they just stay there. So I had Pascal Gross last season, had a really good finish. This year, I've managed to avoid every cheap player. That you might as well. I haven't had Fraser, I haven't had Wilson, I haven't had Jimenez. And these are the kind of players who I think they're just as important for your team as getting the expensive players, right? Because they give you the cash to be able to play around and sort of strengthen the rest of your team. So I think early in the season, even if I need to take hits to bring in these kind of players, then I'm going to, even if they're not as pricey as the kind of more the more illustrious kind of players like from City and Liverpool. I think the Bournemouth players and the Wolves players kind of are just as important. And I also need to make sure I don't get lumbered with just players in ridiculous price points, like Danny Ings. I had a strike force at one point of like Danny Ings, Isaac's Success, and then like Kane or something, and it just gave me no flexibility whatsoever. I couldn't move Success or Ings out like easily, and there was players I wanted, and that kind of thing. I think I need to. You need to stay flexible, basically. So stay flexible, find good budget options, back yourself. They're my 3 lessons for next year.
And just to touch on some of you mentioned some Wolves players there. Do you think you'd be looking at players who've done the budget players who've done well this year? I mean, obviously a lot of it depends on the prices they come in at, but when you look into next season, are you going to be looking at who's done well in the budget category this year, or is it really you have to start again, don't you?
Yeah, it's tough because you're going to expect a lot of these players to have to be a lot more expensive next year. So I wonder what price Jimenez is going to come in at. Is he going to come in around 7.5, something like that? You look at Doherty as well. He could come in at 5.5, and I don't know. It just feels like quite a lot for a player like that. Like the reason they were so good was because they were so cheap. It'll be hard for them to kind of do that again the next season. So I like looking at teams from promoted sides. They tend to have some good options in, or players from players from teams like Bournemouth and things like Fraser. I mean, for 5.5, lots of people got on him quite early because he had a good pre-season. He'd played quite a lot last year. He was in favour with how on the set pieces and things. So that kind of thing looks good. I'm really interested in Leicester next year. I think with Brendan Rodgers now there with a full kind of pre-season behind them, I do wonder if Leicester could mount the top 6 challenge next year. And I'm actually quite glad they didn't have a particularly good last couple of games against City and Chelsea today, because hopefully the powers that be will take that into account when they price them. Because if Maddison comes in at 6.5 again, if they can keep Tielemans at 6.5 or 6, and then their defence as well, around the 5.5 mark, I think there could be some real good players there. So yeah, it's those kind of players that I'm going to be looking at next year, but nothing immediately springs to mind. I think there's going to be a lot of, like someone like Alexander Arnold. I mean, he was 5 million at the start of this season. He's going to come in at 6.5 next year, and then that kind of, I don't know if I'd still, Robertson's 7 and Trent's 6.5. It immediately makes it a lot harder to fit these kind of players in. So I think you've got to when the price list comes out, it's really good just to look through it and just to see who the players are who you think are going to be the real gems for the price.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Liverpool options there, because we've had a few people sort of mention in the chat about. So Graham said that his lesson learned is that next season he'd like to have 6 spots dedicated exclusively to Man City and Liverpool players, and he's name-checked Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, Mane, Sterling, Aguero and Laporte. We'll come to you next, Mark, on sort of some lessons that you've learned, but if you could also maybe give us your opinion on, kind of what Az has just mentioned there. I mean, if people want to have those 6 players, I mean, they're going to have to be spending a hell of a lot of money, aren't they? So that's going to be playing into people's thinking about what base we start from for next season.
Yeah, do you know what? I think that links in quite well to one of my lessons learned this season. It's focusing more so on the bigger teams, the good teams. I think I've done that less this season than any other season. I went into Gameweek 38 with only 4 players from Liverpool and City, and that's after a wild card recently as well. And I don't think at any point this season I was tripled up on Liverpool and City at the same time. And it's looking back, it just makes sense. The 2 best teams in the league. They've got 97 and 98 points, score bags of goals, get loads of clean sheets. So just stick in 3 of each. And it's obviously going to be a lot harder now next season because they'll go up in price. But that's definitely one of the lessons for me is, have a core, 6 or 7 players in your team that are from the best sides in the league, rather than overthinking things and looking for value elsewhere. Yeah, we do need value, but I just think you can not having too many of those fringe players in the squad is one for me. A couple of other notes for me for next season. I think better preparation for game week 1 is a big one for me. I got married last summer, so I didn't get back from honeymoon until around the 1st or 2nd of August. So I spent a lot less time going into this season, looking at pre-season, looking at all different things that I would usually do for the start of the season. So for me, it was all a bit of a rush going into game week 1, and that clouded my judgment. So this season, I'll definitely be spending a lot more time, setting up an overall strategy for the season before game week 1, and sticking to I say sticking to. I think flexibility is always important, but I think having a more thought out plan. I didn't really have a thought out plan going into this season because I just didn't have the time, and that's something I'm definitely going to do July and August this year. Is have a plan, have a couple of golden rules to stick to. A couple of those golden rules are going to be some of the things I've learned from this season is, again, every season I say it, avoid bandwagons. I've had the likes of Walcott, Barkley, Pereira and Knockaert in my team at points of the season. The kind of players you just want to avoid. Another type of player I like to avoid as well is injury prone players. Example there is Arnautovic and Danny Ings caused me so much trouble this season. You just end up having to use a transfer later on to get rid of them. So effectively, you're wasting 2 transfers by bringing them in the first place and having to sell them again. So I think I'm just going to draw up a list next season, injury-prone players, and just stay away from them. I think the biggest thing for me and the biggest challenge for me and for a lot of people now is how you manage the information. It's just information overload, and this has been my first season working full time in the fantasy football field, and it's been a massive challenge. I think I've struggled with having way too much time to spend on FPL. You end up overthinking every move. You read too much content, you listen to too many podcasts. There's so much good content out there, but you can definitely overdo it, and I've definitely overdid it this season. I spend Monday to Friday interacting with other managers, looking at other teams. When it comes to a Friday for my own team, my head's fried. I haven't given it any thought, and I just make poor decisions off that. So I think a big thing for me next season is going to be cutting back a little bit on how much I read, how much I listen to, and just focus on instinct and my own eye test.
I think one thing that helps with doing the Scoutcast, we do the Scoutcast on the Tuesday, which is quite early in the week, and then you've kind of got that thing to kind of look back to and be like, oh, I said that, and that was based on a kind of a gut feel and instinct. So when it comes to Friday and you think about completely different things, it's like, oh, no, well, on Tuesday I said this, so let's stick with that. And that's something I did last year, but I haven't really done this year.
One little thing I picked up from someone this season, about halfway through the season, I can't remember who it was, on a podcast, but what I do on a Sunday night now or a Monday is just look at the team and just what are the first transfers that come to mind and just write them down on a yellow post-it note, put it away, and then when it comes to Friday, I'll take it out again and say, right, what was I thinking on Monday? And if it's changed, why has it changed? And should I just go with that first initial idea? Because over the course of the week, your thinking completely changes. So it's good to have a reference point from the start of the week.
That's a good idea. I might do that next year.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that it's worked too well for me, but I think in theory it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, I definitely I know what you mean about there just being so much information. I mean, again, same here. I mean, I've been working in the sort of journalistic environment for a long time, so fantasy has always been where I can see a lot of it when I've been on social media. But yeah, it's just gone into overdrive this year because it has to be. You, as you say, you talk to so many people. Keeping your head clear, I think, is quite an important thing. Let's come to you now, Neale. Same question again, lessons you've learned, but in terms of just any other thing, just to clear up, as someone who spends as much time in the members area as me, I'm interested to see if there's any individuals you think who've maybe had a bad season points-wise, but haven't been too bad on the stats and have maybe shown a bit of promise, and hopefully going to be those kind of options who will be cheaper next season than they were this season, who could, as was saying earlier on, be the new Mahrez, be the new Fraser, something like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, actually. To be honest, I haven't given much thought to that. But that is something you kind of forget about. We lament the loss of these budget bars. We're not going to see Doherty at 4.5 ever again. Fraser's not going to be 5.5 next season. But there will be players coming down in price. What price is De Bruyne going to be next season, for example? Will they, factor in his injuries into his price, or will they look at his overall score and maybe reduce him by 0.5 or even 1 million or something like that? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Pogba, where do you price him at? We had that fantastic 7-8 game week run, and then nothing much else around that. It's going to be some interesting decisions to make in FPL Towers, I think, in the summer. But yeah, I think in terms of lessons learned, I'm probably just going to reiterate what the boys have said there. Just having that strength of character, that single-mindedness, not to deviate from your strategy, which I stuck to my guns for the first 10 game weeks of the season. I had a plan for the first 2 or 3 months of the season. Looked at the fixture ticker, almost planned my transfers weeks in advance. And then, I mean, I can obviously point to that Salah move, which was sticking to my guns. It was so in a sense, I haven't got any regrets in that. It was my decision to do that. I wasn't persuaded by anybody else. But there have been instances where I've lost it. I've wobbled. I've followed the crowds. I remember getting in Mitrovic fairly early on because it's the sort of fear factor, isn't it? It's been well discussed before in many articles and podcasts, but the sense that I could drop tens of thousands of places if I don't have this player, rather than looking at it as, are they worth getting in? Can I climb the ranks here by avoiding them, getting in someone better? So you mentioned that Kane transfer early on when he played Cardiff. I resisted him then. I resisted people like Bartley. But there's times when I've caved, and it's probably cost me. Even as recently as, was it game week 36, where I had Ward-Prowse in my team all week, with Doherty first sub. Switched it close to deadline because I thought, there's a lot of people in around the top 10k who've got Doherty. And I played him away at Watford, which is daft in hindsight, when I had Ward-Prowse at home to Bournemouth, given their away record. And Ward-Prowse duly scored. So yeah, it's instances like that. It's got to be easier said than done. It's easy now saying, I've got to be stronger next season, but you're going to get moments of weakness. As and Mark have said there, given the noise that you have to encounter now on a daily basis, it's not just on Twitter, it's on the Fantasy Football Scout itself, all these podcasts you listen to. It's very, very hard to stick to your guns amid all that. And that, you could come a cropper if you don't follow the crowd, but you can. It's not known, isn't it? You could potentially do a lot better by ploughing your own furrow. And I think that's a common trait with the top managers. I mean, we've heard a lot of the Meet the Manager series this season, and they've all had different strategies. There's like Jay's approach where he just does it for fun, really, a lot of the time. Mark isn't afraid of an early transfer or a points hit. There's stats-based managers like Adam Hopcroft as well. But they've all got one thing in common, and that is just strength of character and just sticking to the guns and just doing it their way. And yes, they may have a bad season, and now and again, which Jay has this year and Mark as well. But more often than not, these are the managers who finish high up the A-listers, which is something obviously I strive to become. I'm somewhere behind that, but yeah, I think it's. I'll try next season. I'm sure I'll waver at some point, but just try and do it my way, and then if it doesn't work, then at least I won't have any regrets about not being single-minded enough.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo that absolutely as well. I mean, yeah, especially the noise as you mentioned there. It's really weird. I mean, people probably think that there's two ways of looking at it. I think it can get harder depending on how much sort of time you're dedicating to your own team. But one thing that I found this year is when I spend so much time producing the content, by the time I get to the end of my working day, I've probably thought about my team a little bit. But actually, to be honest, I don't really want to spend my evening reading everything else, because to be honest, part of my job is to look at what other content is out there. I mean, we've done a lot of work with the panel that we've had this year, which has been really great. So I'm obviously regularly looking at what's there. But when it gets to the end of the day, I draw a cut-off point, and then that's when I spend some time with my family or do something completely different, like there's nothing to do with football. Because I mean, it's not a common situation, I know, because not everybody has that privilege of being able to do that. But in any job, you have to reach a cut-off point. And we talked about it a little bit earlier on in the season when we talked about mental health on that podcast that was really great to be a part of, because it was definitely really nice to talk about the effect that FPL can have, either for the positive or negative, on mental health, and how we can combat that. And finding a point where you can switch off from FPL is quite important, which sounds a bit odd because we're fantasy content producers and we're telling people switch off at some point, but I think it's very important, not even just for how well you do, but how you manage FPL as part of your life, because you shouldn't let it take over. And we've had a lot of people this season say that when you let it take over and you let it determine your emotional state in any week, that's when you probably start making more mistakes, because it's easier to knee-jerk things, because you're maybe not in as sound of mind as you would be as if you're able to just kind of switch off. And as I said, that's easier said than done. But I've just found great success in sort of drawing a line under, I've just setting myself deadlines of, I'll think about my team for the next 20 minutes and then I'm going to go put the kids to bed, or I'm going to do the washing up or cook tea or something. And then, it makes making decisions easier to live with, I suppose. And that just ties into my other thing that I've learned this season, is just the value of patience in terms of when you have assets who aren't doing particularly well. Taking a much more patient approach to my team has paid dividends this year. I used to be taking hits all over the place in previous seasons, trying to find the next bandwagon, jumping off players too early, and getting to the wrong players by just not being patient enough. And to be honest, I mean, I want to credit Joe for this hugely, because he always sort of jokes about how he's a bit of a dullard, but I mean, at the risk of upsetting some Mavericks out there, I do think it's the best way for kind of prolonged success throughout a whole season, is just to play a patient game with your team. And if you're making chopping changes all the time, you run a risk of causing yourself more grief if the players you get rid of are going to do well. I mean, to be honest, one of the few people I've seen take hits regularly and it always come off is Mark Southerns, but no one's Mark Southerns. He's an FPL god for a reason, because he just knows how to get it right every time. And seeing how he can just make these strange hits pay off in ways I would never think imaginable, but then contrasting that with something that Joe does, which for me is a lot more easy to emulate, which is a much more patient, slow approach, going for maybe the boring players. It's definitely made a huge difference for me this year. It's not as exciting. Maybe I don't even enjoy FPL as much as I did in the years gone by when I was bringing in stupid players for stupid hits. But at the end of the day, all that I look to is how well I've done in the season, and for me personally, it's been a big improvement.
I think every year you see examples of how different people play the game. Like you saw, with Adam, the number one, he wildcarded and kept his Bournemouth players, and no one had even thought of that. You see people taking loads of hits and saying, I mean, Mark hasn't owned Aguero all season, I don't think, and that would be completely ridiculous to a lot of people. So yeah, it's important to remember you can play the game in your way and still do well. Luke's a good example. That's he's had a poor season this year, but normally he does things completely differently and does well.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing I should say, I mean, in terms of playing your own game, I have owned Sterling this year for only 3 game weeks in total, and he has blanked in 2 of them for me. Which, I could maybe turn into a woe is me story, but I mean, again, that's, we were talking at one stage this season, like you for a long time, as was saying, you thought Sterling could maybe be the the overall top point scorer, and at one stage it looked like he could do that, and he was in demand, very much in demand, but I always looked at him as a player who I couldn't feel I could rely on, especially for the captaincy, because. And again, people will disagree with me, but the way I looked at him, I saw him as he's either a 2-point man or a 21-point man. But if I've got someone like Salah who's getting me 7 every week, probably going to do better in the long term. And obviously, in the end, he has outscored him. And that just comes down to the whole sticking to your guns. It took me a while to get to that stage, but you can have success by, as you said, Mark hasn't owned Aguero for as often as a lot of other people have. I've only had Sterling for 3 game weeks and have my best ever season. So. If you've got a clear idea of how you want to play this game, you should always follow it. One other thing I just want to mention, whilst we're on the subject of looking ahead to next season, before we're going to have a look at our clean sheets and differentials, how we've done this season on that. I quite like the look of Everton next season because they've been really, really great in the closing stages of this season. And one thing that I found was quite successful for a lot of managers at the start of this season was when we looked at, if you're looking for somewhere to base your game week 1 squad and strategy around, the last maybe 10 game weeks of the previous season, there's a lot of carryover, and for example, Liverpool defensively were incredible in the last 9 or 10 game weeks of last season. Obviously Virgil van Dijk had come in and made a big impact, so that indicated to us that Liverpool were the team we needed to cover defensively. That's why a lot of us had Robertson, for example. Crystal Palace were in a similar situation. Their defensive returns kind of dipped off after the first maybe 6 or 7 game weeks, but that's how we thought, well, we want to cover Crystal Palace. Oh, and there's this defender here, Wan-Bissaka, who's at 4 million and proved an incredible signing. So when you look at the success of that strategy last season, if we look at how this season has ended, Everton defensively have been incredible. I think it's 8 clean sheets in their last 10. And when you look at their season as a whole, they haven't really been too outstanding. In fact, to be honest, 6 months ago, it looked like Marco Silva might even lose his job because it was going so badly. So I can't see any of their players really having a huge price rise. I mean, maybe Luca Dean might do, but it won't be huge. If he was more than 5.5, I'd be shocked. And some of their assets might even go down in price. I mean, maybe Pickford goes down because the start of the season he was an awful investment to have, but towards the end of the season got a lot better. But effectively, they are going to be a team who won't have a price hike in quite the same way that a Wolves will. So I think there's going to be a lot of options there that are going to be in that sort of bracket. I mean, Sigurdsson has actually, I think, had his best ever season, which you just wouldn't have seen coming in maybe October, November. So when the new season comes around and the fixtures come out, if Everton have some really nice fixtures and they've got a couple players in the sort of 5 million defender bracket, maybe some midfielders 7.5, I'm seriously going to be looking at those particular players because they do look very exciting and they've definitely found their identity under Marco Silva at both ends of the pitch, so they could be good all over.
With Silva is he could be a bit of a streaky manager, sort of the Portuguese Pardew in a sense, because it happened at Watford where he had a really good start, and then he had that long run which ended up getting the sack from Watford. Happened again this season, didn't it? Everton had a decent period, and then they went on that stretch of results where he was fighting for his future. And I worry about what's going to happen in the summer because Andre Gomez, who's been fairly influential for a large chunk of that. Maybe it's not so much past couple of months, but him and Zuma, who's probably going to go back to Chelsea, has been a big part of that back four. Will they hang on to Richarlison? He's been linked with a move away. So
it's a good point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'll be monitoring them over the summer. The sort of strange situation we're in for next season is when we've talked about all these players will be going up in price. And generally speaking, in previous years, there've always been bargains to be had the following season. Teams are under new management. For example, at the start of this season, we had Sarri and Emery coming in. We didn't know how, it was a bit of an unknown quantity. There was potential to be had there. Aubameyang's, season top scoring forward. This season, I think there's been so few managerial changes amongst the teams who've stopped up. So we've seen Fulham and Huddersfield change managers. I think there's only been 3 managerial changes, and that's Solskjaer, Hasenhüttl, and who's the other one? There's another one. I can't remember who it is.
Corpuel, Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Rodgers. Yeah. So generally speaking, we know what we're going to expect next year, unless there's some change in the summer, which I can't really see. Maybe Benitez going, which will just make Newcastle worse. We kind of know what we're going to get next season to an extent. Yes, there'll be acquisitions in the summer, maybe a few bargains to be had coming in from further afield, but it's maybe a case of as you were from this season in terms of the prices, in terms of the players. It's just the prices are going to be higher, a lot of them. So, and I can't really see a team coming up from the Championship and emulating what Wolves did. I mean, Norwich and Sheffield United, I don't think have got big kitties behind them as Wolves did. Really, they've spent a lot of money. Got people like Schürrle in and Mitrovic. I guess whoever comes up in the playoffs will stand a better chance because the likes of Leeds or Villa probably got a bit more capital behind them. But yeah, we could be scrabbling around really for bargains next year.
I think some people are saying in the chat now there could be a huge, as much as people have had to choose between Salah and Mane perhaps in the last sort of 3 or 4 months, because some of us got on quite well having both of them at the start of the season, but next season are we going to be able to have both Mane and Salah? Because Mane especially I think is going to get a price rise probably to at least 11.5 million, something like that. Salah might come down, I don't know, but I can't see him go. He's still going to be hugely expensive. There's lots of things to consider, and obviously, like we said at the top of this little section, the Liverpool defence. I mean, really having a double up on Liverpool is going to leave you really short of cash elsewhere because from their defenders, because they could all be at 7 million. You never know. So yeah.
Robertson's the top scoring defender.
Yeah, of all time.
Of all time, he'll be 7 minimum. It's a lot.
Yeah, plenty of things to consider over the summer, and of course,
positioning as well. I wonder if Mane and Salah will stay as midfielders.
Yeah, I was just going to say that could change too. I think the only one I'm pretty sure will probably change is probably Jota, because he's a centre forward. There's no way he's a midfielder. But with the Liverpool ones, it's tough because the changes they made at the start of this season, it largely looks like ones, because I think we now have such a preference for 4-3-3 that you have players who are playing in wide areas who are basically forwards, but the criteria that FPL seems to be going down, if you're playing in the front three and you're left or right, you're still a midfielder. It's if you play through the middle that you become a centre forward, like we saw with Firmino, we saw with Arnautovic, and we saw with Zaha, because he was playing quite central, and then this year he played wide, but now he's a forward. Someone else has just mentioned in the chat, maybe Nathan Redmond as well, because he played as centre forward quite a lot. It's those who play through the middle. Well. Yeah, Son Heung-min possibly. And the thing with Salah is that sometimes he played as a centre forward, but he stopped really playing centre forward in maybe January, something like that, and that's when it went back to Firmino. So I think Mane and Salah can probably just about survive as midfielders for next year, but we never know. They might change their criteria up at FPL, and if that happens, if they both become forwards, then it's complete game changer. So yeah, plenty of things still up in the air for next season, and once we start to get an accurate picture of what that looks like, we will have plenty of content on that. Let's move on now to our clean sheets and differentials, and I've been trying to get hold of these for weeks, and I do apologise it's taken so long, but we have the incredible spreadsheets that I believe have been built by FPL Fairy. Is that right, Az?
That is right, yeah, absolute hero. Diligently all season plugging these in. So just to go through them, start with clean sheets.
Yeah, let's go.
So I'll run through these quite quickly because obviously Neale and Mark aren't. Well, Neale's done a couple with a good record. I don't think General you've been a part of this, but essentially every week we pick the clean sheets and differentials out, and it's now the end of the season, so we can kind of review them. So in first place for clean sheets is Joe, who is not here. He's recovering at home, but a nearly 50% success at clean sheets is a pretty good return. So he takes the mantle for the top picker of the clean sheets. David, you're close second though. 46%. You nearly picked it. If United could have just kept a clean sheet against Cardiff,
they always let everyone down.
Yeah, literally down there. But yeah, I mean, to go the whole season with a 50% clean sheet record, I think is for both of you is a pretty good effort. Luke and I have been tied. We're both on 35%. I've had some more picks than Luke, so I'm claiming victory over him. But yeah, they're surprisingly hard to pick out the old clean sheets. So I think we've all done relatively okay with those. So moving on to the differentials. Now these were harder because we had to pick under 5% owned players, so obviously that can be quite tricky. But it also means that we had some real gems sort of through the season. So Joe actually got the highest score of all of us with a pick of 14 for Sterling, who at the start of the season was owned by less than 5%. So that just shows, you can find some bargains, quite early in the season if you look hard enough. So with differentials, we didn't really fare so well. So top of the pile, was it Joe again? Joe again with 34%. Again, just shows that he's the best out of all of us, and we need him back next year. So hurry back, Joe. David, second, 31%. Not too bad. And then Luke and I tied again on 29%. So I think Luke and I are the same person, is what I've learned from this. Shout out to Andy, though, differentials. Not been so much a regular this year, but when he has come on, he's got a 50% return with 7 right and 7 wrong. So depends how you kind of want to do it. Out of the regulars, I'd say Joe. Joe should probably get it, but if you're feeling generous, then you can give it to Andy. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we do this again next year. And if people like it, if people do like it, let us know. If not, then we'll bin it off. But I quite enjoyed it, particularly differentials. I think it's nice to, although it's only for one game week, it is quite tough, but it can give people a bit of an idea of who they should be considering. So thanks for listening to that, and thanks to FPL Fairy for plugging all those numbers in each week.
Yeah, definitely big shout out to FPL Fairy, because we probably didn't really have time to track it ourselves. So it's always great that we've got a nice loyal fan base that are willing to help us out. That's much appreciated. That sort of brings us to the end of the kind of the FPL centered version of this particular podcast. What I just want to hear from you guys now, and because obviously a lot of people are going to be thinking what to do with their lives for the next 2 months. There's no World Cup. Maybe if you're feeling a little bit obsessed with football, you could maybe watch African Cup of Nations. I'm sure we'll maybe tune into the Nations League. But what are the plans for the summer? And and maybe for the start of next season as well. So we'll go for you, Neale. What are you gonna do over the summer? I know I noticed you booked a few holidays in the diary, but outside of that, what are you gonna be up to?
Trying to avoid football for as long as possible, as long as the job can allow. Obviously, we'll be doing content over the summer, but I'm not getting involved in anything over the summer. I'm resisting the urge to join. I think there's an African Cup of Nations fantasy league. But obviously, after monitor the games for how Salah and Mane are doing and things like that. If they're going there, I'm not going to be taking part in Elitserien or the Swedish league or the Icelandic league. These have all got fantasy Premier League counterparts, but no, I'm looking forward to the rest. I need it. This was the case before I started in the job. I always look forward to the end of the season. I'm not one who really wants to watch football all summer. Who misses it. I relish the 3 months off. So I will be probably, as I say, holidaying quite a bit, because we're in a position where we can't really take holiday for 9 months of the year. So we'll be using all our leave up. But before it'll be back again. It'll be about 6 weeks or so before the game launches again. If it was the same sort of time as last season, maybe 7-8 weeks. And then we'll be back at it again before you know it. But I'm really looking forward to not touching FPL with a barge pole for at least another 2.
I can imagine that, Mark, it's probably a similar story, right?
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy this break. I'm just going to enjoy what we're going to have, probably about 12 or 13 weekends where I can't get a red arrow. So I'm just going to enjoy that.
Unless you go to an air show.
Enjoy the weekend without red arrows. Obviously I've worked full time now in fantasy, so I'll be winding down a little bit, but I'll still be doing bits and pieces, a couple of different projects I'm working on, hoping to get my own website launched for the new season as well. So that'll keep me busy as well. I did get roped into Elitserien fantasy, so when I finish this Scoutcast, I'll be going to check the Norwegian scores to see how they're going today. That's when you're a fantasy addict. That's when
you know you've got.
That's when you know you have a problem. So yes, and another thing I'm going to do. I'm one of the probably 1% of the population that haven't watched Game of Thrones yet. So I've got the box set now, 1 to 7.
Ooh, nice.
That starts tomorrow. So I'm just going to binge.
Mark, just stop there. Stop at 7. There's nothing to be seen in Series 8.
So forget about Series 8.
Wow, yeah. we just opened up a hugely controversial tangent now.
It'll take me about a year to get through it, I'm sure. Anyway, the way I watch things, so that'll keep my mind off FPL.
It probably won't be less harrowing though. Just to warn you, it will get pretty emotional. Maybe even as emotional as FPL, but I won't say any more. What about you, Az? What are you doing over the summer?
Well, we've got a house move. We're moving house in a few weeks, so that'll keep you occupied for a bit, which would be nice. I'm going to have a think about if I can start doing some, because I did the Black Box podcast sort of earlier in the season, and then they were kind of taking up a bit too much time. So I wonder if I can kind of streamline that process a bit, because I did enjoy doing those. So it might be nice to kind of do a bit of my own kind of content a bit. So have to think about how I can make that work. Yeah, other than that, no plans to do any FPL games. Going to enjoy. They're not. Well, I mean, I love the World Cup. Don't get me wrong, but I think it will be nice to have a few weeks without any football. I think my girlfriend will be happy as well, because it seems to never end for her. So yeah, just rest up a bit and get ready for the next season. Really, yeah, not too much to do.
Yeah, similar story for me. It's all centered around the family, really. I mean, we have, I mean, Neale will know this. You know, we have a lot of late nights with a lot of the evening games that we have, and you know, long days over the season. So it'd be nice to get a bit more sleep, and then B, have a bit more about me to you know, be with the family and spend time with the wife and kids. And I don't have any box sets planned, but I'm sure I'll find one. I mean, there's plenty of great TV out there. I just wanted to, a few people in the chat have been telling us what they're getting up to over the summer, and some nice suggestions in here. Karam has reminded me right when I didn't mention Elite Syrian at the top. Yes, Elite Syrian is still on, and we should mention that we will actually have Elite Syrian content throughout the summer, so those who are still playing that game, we should have, we've been having roughly one article a week on that. That'll still be there. Same with the Swedish one as well. The Cricket World Cup's on, so we could watch that. Apologies to Jake Matheson, who has exams this summer. It's easy to forget that those exist when you finished school several years ago. But full credit to him for, you know, I mean, let's be honest, an FPL game week's like an exam anyway, and he's going to be doing several more of those over the summer. So good luck for those. I also forgot Copa America as well. So you know, possibly even more implications for the start of next season if we've got people travelling back from completely different time zone. And Wimbledon and the French Open as well have also been suggested. So plenty of sports out there for people to sink their teeth into. Before we finish, we just have two things just to finish up. The season's obviously you know, come to an end, but there's still plenty of stuff that we're going to be getting prepped for next season, and we are in the next day or so, or maybe even tonight, going to be posting something on the website. We're looking out for it's just basically a talent call, effectively. Some of you might remember that Mark put something out on the site in around February, March last year. And that is basically where me and Neale and Jeff came from. So we're going to be putting something out to, you know, just to put our feelers out. So if there's anyone out there who feels like they can get involved with something with Fantasy Football Scout, then let us know. There'll be more information in that article, which will probably come out later tonight. And of course, the only other thing that we should mention is, of course, a little bit of an update on Joe. You know, it's been a tough few weeks for his family and everyone who knows Joe, because, you know, hugely devastating news that he received a few weeks ago. A huge health scare that had him in hospital for several weeks. You know, we've all been thinking of him pretty much every episode that we did in the aftermath of him having to take some time off. You know, the live chat was just full of questions. How's Joe getting on? Which has been really nice, and we fed all that back to his family, and they're really genuinely touched by the support that everybody's given to Joe. So I mean, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been keeping him in their thoughts, because it's you know, been really nice to see everyone sort of come together.
He tweeted today.
And he did, which was that's our final update on Joe, which is great. I mean, it's something like 1,500 people have liked this tweet. It's great. We knew that he was you know, in a position where he could think about it, because he sent us a message via his partner that he was going to be triple captaining Aguero in Gameweek 37. Of course, that didn't come off, but that doesn't matter. You know, the fact that he was able to you know, think about his team was great. And yeah, today he was able to tweet, thank you so much everyone for the kind words. I'm getting better every day. You know, Find Out Hospital will be back soon. That was a few days ago. And then today he was tweeting about how basically he'd had 3 or 4 goals and he'd signed Redmond and he'd come in for him. So yeah, he said that he's looking to be back within a few weeks rather than months. So I mean, we'll keep you updated on how he's getting on. I'm sure he will as well. But you know, it's really nice to hear that he's making some good progress. He's back home and focusing on his recovery. And to be honest, you know, like I said, the summer break is perfect for him. You know, perfect time for him to you know, get back to his best. And yeah, hopefully we can still have Joe getting involved next year. I mean, obviously that's a decision for him to make. You know, it's most important that, you know, focuses on his health. But as I said, really great news that he's doing better than he was a few weeks ago. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I mean, I just want to personally thank everyone as well for the support that you've given the editorial team and everyone involved in Fantasy Football Scout this year. It's been a season with many highs and many lows. Enjoy your summer, everyone. We'll be back to do it all again in a few weeks' time. So on that, it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, all.